What's the most important resource that you have? If you really thought about this deeply, I think you'd come to the same conclusion that Joey and I did. It's time. In our newest book, What's Without Wall Street, the 3 Steps to Financial Freedom Through Passive Income, we talk about how are we tracking that time? What is the thing that we can do to get more of that time back?
That's right. If you've ever been listening to our podcast and thought, man, it would be amazing if I could take all the things that you guys have learned over the last 10 years and just summarize them, put them in some way to easily digest them and take action, that's what this book is all about. You're not going to want to miss it. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/new book and get your copy today.
All right, let's break down the first point here, which is really what are the common themes that we have found through reading this book. So I hope you'll give me a point, Mark. I'm going to let you go first. Give me a point from one of these that you found that you really like. Talk about the book that it came from. And if you get some bonus points, if you can apply it to something that you or somebody you watched done.
The point I'll start with is questioning what you've been taught. I mean, we as Americans, I remember growing up as a kid, question authority, right? Question the government, question the things that are coming at you. Don't be, ridiculous about that, but have a skeptical criticism or a skeptical mindset of, hey, does this really apply? And so in Garrett Gunderson's book, Killing Sacred Cows, that's basically the thesis is we need to be questioning what we've been taught because maybe that's not necessarily right. So some examples inside of his book is home ownership, a surefire investment. I remember growing up hearing my parents say, got to buy a house. You got to invest into a home, because that becomes your asset. Well, now hold on a second. Is that really true? Is it really an asset? And we can talk about what the definition of an asset versus a liability is. The next one is all debt is inherently bad. I've come across so many people who are so adverse to the thought of debt to the point that they will do everything they can to never have a credit card, never have any type of loan, never have any type of debt. And I'll say that there is bad debt out there. You definitely don't want bad debt, but there's also good debt, right? There's debt that we can use in a productive manner. And that's what Garrett goes through in that book of Killing Sacred Cows. And the sacred cow is these myths that we've been told enough times that we start to think this is the way it has to be, that all debt is bad. A home is always the best investment you can ever make in your life. And maybe certain types of qualified retirement plans are the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so he starts to debunk those and challenge that. And so what I would want to take away from that as a book is just because maybe someone said it doesn't mean that it has to be true. It doesn't mean that it is true, right? So question it, do your research, try to look at it from all the angles and really get some other ideas. Ranji, the book is Killing Sacred Cows by Garrett Gunderson.
I love that. And we recently had Garrett on the podcast. So I love that. Great choice. How about for you, Ern? Give me one book and a theme that's come out of it.
Yeah, well, out of a lot of these books, I get this theme that if you want to be fabulously successful, you just need to turn over your money and let it ride in the market for a really long time. Sorry, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
Pattern interrupt.
Sorry, that's when those are the books that I find in the fiction section. I apologize. No, the exact opposite of that. I think a theme that we find in these books that is, if you want to grow real wealth, then you need to be involved. Your participation is required. And we see that in lots of books. I'll give you a few, Russ, and start with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mark just mentioned buying assets instead of buying liabilities. That's where I get that idea from. The follow-up book to that is Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow Quadrant, that the person who wants to go on that wealth building journey a lot of times begins by realizing I can do this way better than the corporation that I'm working in, and they go out and become self-employed. And then they grow and scale that business by putting in systems. And how do you grow systems? Well, you have to know the systems. You have to be involved in setting those things up. And you become a business owner. And then with your excess capital, you have to then go buy those assets. And well, how are you going to go on that journey? You need other books to help you, like the E-Myth, which gives you a vision of expanding and how you can grow the business from what a technician is doing to grow that entrepreneurial mind and how you can grow that business to become a mature business. And so those types of books help you to realize that if you're going to grow wealth, you need to be involved.
Stallion, tell me, what do you believe, like, how behaviors affect people's decision making? As you read through these books, are you finding that as a common theme as well?
Oh man, behaviors are critical, both in like a proactive sense and a defensive, like a reactive sort of sense. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Your human nature is something that has to have guardrails around it. Like in Become Your Own Baker, Nelson Nash talks about, and it's so funny because when you start reading the book, it actually leads off with these human problems. And you're like, I thought this was a book about money. Like, I get to the numbers, like get to the strategies and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, he talks about Parkinson's law, like that your budget, essentially your spending will rise to meet your income, and time will rise or like increase to meet the gap of time that you've been given, or a project rather. And stuff like that, you're like, wait a minute, if I don't get my spending in line, I will never have the surplus to be able to create passive income. Things like Willie Sutton's law, that wherever you create wealth or wherever wealth is created, someone will try to come in and steal it, i.e. the government. So there's the whole access, there's this whole like focus on like taxes and other things. The arrival syndrome. If you never stop learning, then you can always be increasing your ability to earn, which I will tie that to Alex Hormozi. Alex Hormozi's $100 million offers that he has. It's a lot of marketing, but there's also a lot of focus on money. And he talks about how investing in yourself is the best ROI he's ever had. And he said, because increasing your ability to earn is the greatest ROI. Things like that, like proactively having behaviors of investing in yourself and like defensively putting guardrails on the things that will naturally get out of line if you allow them to, those things are massive indicators of your ability to create wealth, to create financial freedom for yourself. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but like most books talk about those things.
But I think that, one of the things I've seen in these books is that it starts off with mindset. And whenever you're following our process, and if you haven't already taken action on that, you can go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/free call and jump on a coaching call with one of our coaches to talk about what is the right next thing for you. But in that right next thing process, we talk about how mindset, strategy, vision is so important. And one of the things I've seen in these books is that they really focus on mindset. It talks about what are our beliefs and attitudes on money itself. Whether it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's talking about the difference between his rich dad, which is his best friend's dad, who thought of how he's going to go out and produce value to the world to create income streams that would come back to him instead of having to trade time for money. That's compared to his poor dad, which was his actual father, who said, hey, go through school, get a great education, go get a job, and earn an income from that job for the rest of your life. Because he had a scarce mindset, a limited beliefs on what was possible. I think about, Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, right? It was all about that. It's literally sitting down and envisioning what's possible, like the power of thought, the power of visualizing for yourself. In our process that you go through this, the Passport Challenge, we talk about not only thinking about what you would, want to be, do, and have, but also taking that and then putting it up as a visual for yourself to see from this point forward. So, because your power of your brain, as you can see things through your brain, kind of to what you said, Mark, you can see some of those books that you were reading, the pages from those books, or Tony Robbins has talked about this too. What your brain sees will actually move toward it. And it actually will start to see things that didn't even exist and pull it toward, it will start to move those things toward what you thought it should be. I think that our brain, the way that we see stuff, whether we have an abundant mindset, that there is not a limited pie of goods but there's an ability to create as many pies as we want. So whether you're a half full glass, half empty, or half full, dictates really what will happen in your life. And that's why I believe that a lot of the books that are not on this list, or that you started to talk about early on, the books that I read when I was a certified financial planner, all the books that I was professionally trained to read, this was kind of the book order that I needed to read. It was talking about really, hey, I need to get up a certain amount of money and hope that it wouldn't run out, because eventually I was going to have to spend it all. As compared to the books that are on this list, it's talking about how do you create an endless income and streams of income that will last far beyond your life. And so you take the book Becoming Your Own Baker that you referenced a second ago, where Nelson Nash, who was a forester by trade, and he said he was teaching landowners about how to plant trees. And most of the landowners he was talking to were in the 50s and 60s, and they weren't going to be able to harvest those trees for 40, 50, 60, or 70 years. They were having to think long term. They were not thinking scarce. They were thinking abundant. And that's what I've noticed of not only reading these books, but also spending time in those mastermind groups of the people who have been able to achieve far more than they would have thought possible, because they would sit down and visualize for themselves what was possible. And ultimately, that was the essentials for them achieving their goals and their aspirations. Let's move on to the second point here, which is the flawless frameworks, the processes that we found and through reading these books. Mark, give me one of those frameworks that has stuck out to you that's been so instrumental.
How to save and where to save. There's a formula that's out there, and if you were to Google, you could actually look it up too, where they say, if you have 100% of your income, 10% should go to savings, 20% should go to investing, and 70% should go to living. Well, that's a great formula to use. And one thought on that, right? If I'm diagnosing what am I doing, if I'm questioning what I'm doing, going back to Garrett Gunderson's book earlier, is that the best thing for me? If I divide up my soldiers, if I have 100 soldiers and I've put 10 off on one mission, 20 on another, and 70 on a third mission, I've broken up my squad. Well, let's go look at another book, Becoming Your Own Banker with Nelson Nash. How can I get my entire squad to move through one vehicle where I can then still do the saving, the investing, and the living? Is there a more efficient way to do it? And so with Nelson's book, right, he talks about using properly structured whole life insurance, the infinite banking concept. And it was a way to take what was a good formula, 10% savings, 20% investing, 70% living, and actually make it 100% into a system that I had complete control and autonomy over. So now I'm basically putting 100% towards savings. And that savings is also investing into my future, investing into my personal banking system. Out of that comes part of my living. So I was able to ball it all up into one. And again, questioning what I had thought was possible, questioning what I even knew could be out there. So that was application of 2 books in one. And so that was my diagnostic of how can I make things better.
What about for you, Ern? As you look at these books, you find frameworks, as Mark just said. What was one of those diagnostics that allowed them to make a decision that was factual and that was data-driven as compared to being maybe emotional in nature?
Yeah, I think anybody running a business is trying to make good, factual, informed decisions, and might have some questions like, what is a good profit margin for the business that I'm running? How much should I pay myself? How do I figure out what that should be? Am I overpaying or am I underpaying? And my experience is most are underpaying, by the way. And how much do I need to set aside for taxes? Because it seems like I'm surprised each year when my CPA tells me my tax bill and I'm just not prepared for that. That's disrupts the whole rest of the year trying to catch up for that. So those types of questions, the book Profit First by Michael Michalowicz gives, in my opinion, a really, really practical framework to organize your business that answers those questions. When you create revenue, you don't need a fancy P&L statement to determine what all these things should be. You can create a formula on the front end of where to allocate money and make your business fit into this so that your business is running profitably first, which is the goal of the business, right? To be profitable. That's why you're doing this, and gives a framework then to, again, say, how much should you be paying yourself? What should your margins be in profit? And how do you set this up so that it's good for you, but also good for your future? And I'll take it one step further. In our world, helping people create financial freedom, Profit First helps the business owner get organized in the business so that they can more regularly take the profit and the earnings from that business, take it and store it using, Mark, what you just described, this infinite banking process, to then use that to go build income streams around the business. And then in that new business, operate the Profit First method to organize passive income. I just think that's one of the most practical frameworks out there, one of the biggest transformative, big impact with one book that I think any business owner can take advantage of right now.
No doubt. I mean, the way to discern between fact and fiction is to really better understand it personally, right? That's why we talk about how you have to become a better investor. You have to understand who you are as an investor, but then you build and improve your financial literacy, right? Robert Kiyosaki in the book Fate talked about how vital it was to learn how to critically think about investing. To Mark, to your first point early on, is to challenge the misinformation that's being propagated out there by mainstream media on financial advice, right? There's a lot of things that is keeping people in financial slavery because they are following bad details. Stallion, talk a little bit about what's the framework that you've gathered out of here that can help people make very intellectual financial decisions.
Well, I'm going to stay on the topic of like your business, as Ernie was just kind of breaking down for us. But I'm going to go at it from the standpoint that Tim Ferriss talks about in the 4-Hour Work Week, that, man, it's got to, your business not only should produce a profit, as Ernie was mentioning, it should also support your lifestyle, right? Creating a lifestyle design is what we're really after. But so often when we become a business owner, we allow the business to then take over our lifestyle. And it's the opposite of what our intention was to begin. He breaks it down as a way to automate certain things. And he actually breaks it down. He calls it DEAL, right? Define, eliminate, automate, and liberate. Those things, if you take your business line item by line item, you find out which things you have to define, then you can eliminate certain things, you automate the rest, and that creates that freedom. I think that's a super helpful mindset, but then framework to put your business through. And then the second part, we've already kind of mentioned the E-Myth, but I'll go back to that, is, man, your operating business could be your greatest passive income if you can build it with the end in mind. So having the lifestyle, and then the E-Myth talks about how you can actually hire yourself for each role within the business, define what those roles are, and then go fire yourself while you hire other people for those specific roles. And I was just talking to a business owner this morning who owns several salons, and talking to her, I said, you know, the reason that she happens to be in our passive income mastermind, I said, you know, we never intended for the passive income mastermind to have a bunch of active business advice, but we've expanded to now include the business icons portion of our mastermind, because one of the number one places that you should be building passive income is by switching your operating company to a passive income business, by implementing things like the E-Myth. As soon as you get yourself out of that operator role and you put the right people who have the right talent and the right motivation to support your business, you have created ultimate freedom. So, man, those are two frameworks around your business that are just amazing in my mind. If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we are able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS. There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared though for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
A point I'm going to make, that is not my point, but I'd be remiss as you're talking about that. I was thinking about as I'm hosting this, I need to be working, and my framework that I need to be working on is my late night DJ voice. As Chris Voss would say, never split the difference, right? Like that's a framework, right? As negotiation is such an important skill to learn. It's an important framework of how to mirror and match, how to properly label things and to frame questions in a way to influence the outcomes that you want positively, right? And he talks about that in his book, Never Split the Difference, which I think is a great book that describes money. My son and I were riding down the road. Joey and I are in the process of negotiating a business deal. And I hung up and I was like, buddy, you know how you like to play games? You like to play, with stuffed animals and play Monopoly. Man, the game I love to play is negotiation. And I was explaining that to him in terms that he could almost gather, I think. Maybe not. But either way, it was fun. I think that's a good framework. But here's a framework, and this is one that I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, which is what Robert Kiyosaki lays out in Rich Dad Poor Dad. He gives the simple definition of what an asset is. So many times people don't truly understand what assets are. And most of the assets that people would put down on their balance sheet are actually, in his eyes, liabilities. An asset, in his terms, is just as simple as anything that puts money into your pocket. And that's why we're so big on building passive income streams, right? Those assets that we buy, we know they're assets because they produce passive income. A liability then is just the opposite, anything that takes money out of our pocket. So that's why he is one of those that people like to point at, and he gets, a lot of hate mail for by saying your primary home that you live in is not an asset. It's a liability. Now, do we need a place to live? Sure. But what he's saying is that, that it's not putting money in your pocket, it's taking money out. I mean, Grant Cardone would say the same thing, that you should rent where you live and you should own what you rent. And, whether that's right or wrong for you, I don't know. But I think that's a framework that he's utilized, both of them have utilized in the real estate space to create a lot of wealth for themselves. Another one that Robert Kiyosaki talks about in the Cashflow Quadrant, he describes the 4 different ways people make money. Stallion. The E quadrant, which is the employees, how do they make money? What is it that they do?
They trade time for money.
That's right. Now, they work for money. Now, the S quadrant, which is the self-employed person, the person that probably 99% of the people out there that have a business license operate under, how do they make money?
They work really hard for money.
Every one of us nodding their head as they're riding down the road going, yeah, man, I worked 70 hours this week, right? I stayed up last night, doing HR. I woke up this morning doing accounting. Now I'm doing the technical aspect of it. But then on the right side of the quadrant, where he's trying to get us to, in the framework of mine, he says, hey, what does a big business owner look like? How do they make money, Stallion?
Other people's time and energy.
Yeah, they have other people working for the money for them. And then the last quadrant in the bottom right, he talks about the I quadrant, the professional investor. How do they make money?
Their money makes money.
That's right. So there's a framework that we can follow and say, okay, well, if I'm in the E or S, how is it that I can start slowly moving myself into the B or I quadrant? If you have a framework of thought, you know what's happening. And I'll talk about this in a second about ways to make money. But one of the things that he talks about is who pays the most in taxes. It's the S quadrant, right? They're probably paying upwards. If you're a highly paid professional, you're in that S quadrant, you can pay as much as 60%. 60% of every dollar you bring in can go out the door. But who can pay the least? The professional investor can pay as little as zero. I actually got a text message like 2 days ago that says, bro, thank you so much. We just got back from our accountant. We made 200% more in 2023 than we did in 2022. And we paid $0 in taxes. Last year, we paid a lot in taxes and made a lot less money. And he says it's a direct result of what the strategies and implementation of passive income streams I've been getting while I've been in the passive income mastermind. I'm like, That's fantastic. That's just proving out Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, that when we better understand what we're doing, we know what to do with the money. All right, speaking of money, let's move into our last point. So we've covered what were some of those frameworks, or what were the frameworks, and then before that, what were the themes a part of these books? What were some of the money-making principles that we got out of this? Mark, I'll let you go first.
I like learning things. And unfortunately, some of the things I have to learn are from failure. So if you can learn from failure, you're going to be able to figure out, hey, what opportunities for growth are there, right? How do I not repeat this on the same scale, and hopefully not repeat it on a bigger scale? So learning from your failure, finding those opportunities, because let's face it, I don't care how long you're in this passive income investing game, you're going to have bumps in the road. It's going to happen. And it may take several innings before it happens, or you might strike out at the first time at bat. And so that's why I like the book 3 Feet from Gold by Lechner and Reed. 3 Feet from Gold, the theory, the premise of the book is there are so many instances of people who stopped mining, and if they would have just kept following their dream and kept chipping away, they were literally 3 feet away from the vein of gold that made someone else incredibly rich. So 3 feet from gold. The next one in there would be persistence, right? So sticking with that same theme of, hey, you shouldn't be giving up on your goals. So back to what we had said earlier, if you've got clearly defined goals, if you know what you're trying to do, what the end result is that you want, right? If you want to be spending time with your spouse, spending time with your kids before they grow up, you know what that vision looks like, you know what that emotional anchor feels like, you're probably ready to start moving mountains. And when the times get tough, when you're chipping away and you don't see a vein of gold, you need to fall back on that and remember why you're doing this. I'm doing this because this is going to create a better future for my family, better future for my legacy generation, so that you can keep swinging that axe and get to that next 3 feet and find that bit of gold in there. So the last analogy I want to leave you with is, think about a baby, right? There was one time in your life when you did not worry at all about failure. You had absolutely no concern in the world for failing, and you failed miserably. I mean, horribly. We all did. I mean, you probably don't remember the first time you tried to stand up, but I'm pretty sure you fell, right? But you kept getting back up. You kept getting back up because you knew what you were trying to, you knew there was a goal in mind, and there were all these people cheering you on. So that's what I want everyone to remember, is think about the determination you had when you were a child to learn how to walk. And that's the determination you should have as you're moving through this passive income, if you know what your goal is.
Love that. Aaron, how about you, man? What's one of the money-making principles that you've taken away from these books?
Yeah. Russ, do you happen to know what my favorite food is?
Pizza.
No, it's not pizza. It's a hamburger. In 2024, I've gotten the courage to say, all right, the favorite thing I like to eat is a hamburger. Simple thing. It's my favorite. Now, there's some pretty good restaurants in Birmingham that serve hamburgers, right? And they make really good hamburgers, but they don't make as much money as McDonald's does selling hamburgers. So, Joey, question for you. You're a food connoisseur. Where's the best place to get a hamburger in Birmingham?
Tell you what, one of my favorites is, the best burger in Birmingham is at Highlands.
Okay, perfect. Heard that. Yeah. Now, Highlands does not make as much money as McDonald's, do they?
No.
This is money-making tips. This third point, I'm going to give you a personal reflection. Number one, hamburger is my favorite food. Number two, McDonald's does not make as good of a hamburger as Highlands. And I think anybody who's ever had a Highlands hamburger would agree with that. Or anybody who's had a hamburger from McDonald's would probably agree with that, even if they've never had a hamburger from Highlands. And the point of that is in the book, The E-Myth. I'm going to double down on the E-Myth. That rocked my world when I read it, was that in order for me to grow my income, I don't need to learn to necessarily make a better hamburger. I need to run a better business. So, Joey, you mentioned earlier about the E-Myth, the framework it lays out of how you can grow and scale a mature business where you can fire yourself. Well, in order for you to fire and replace yourself in a job, you must grow and become the next person to manage the next role. And in the E-Myth, it breaks down this helpful idea, and this has made me more money, this has helped you make more money, is that there's basically the entrepreneur in a business, there's the manager in a business, and there's a technician in a business. The technician loves making the best hamburger ever. The manager loves making all the pieces come together to make that hamburger, and the entrepreneur likes to serve that hamburger and then go think about making the next business to make the next thing. And this was a helpful insight, not necessarily from the book, but not too long ago, I realized I don't have to be an entrepreneur by wiring, but I can think and train myself to act entrepreneurially. And that's made all the difference in that I don't have to be the best at the thing. I want to be the best at thinking about where this business fits in all the offerings of my market and how I can grow that business to best meet the customer's needs. If I can do that, then I can be thinking entrepreneurially, and that will make you more money than the best hamburger chef in the world.
That's so good. One of the things I loved about when he talked about in the E-Myth, they were breaking down the different ways that you could do that well, and it's by creating those processes. Those processes are exactly what gets you to that point. And how many of us running a business do not have all of those processes in place that can help us be more successful? Stallion, what about for you, brother?
Well, I'll tell you, the path to making money is laid out in one of the best books I've ever read. You may have heard of it, Wealth Without Wall Street, 3 Steps to Financial Freedom Through Passive Income. Get your copy today, right, on Amazon. But if you just don't have time to just cover just that one golden book, I'll add another. And that is just the book of combining all of these things together. That is, operating businesses are the fastest way to grow wealth. Now, that's a quote from our mentor, Sharon Srivatsa. But at the end of the day, if you are in a position where you're working a W-2 job and the idea of starting a business is overwhelming, in fact, you've never even thought about it because you're like, that's too big for me. Like you kind of just can't even imagine it. Don't think of it having to be that B quadrant business that Russ outlined before today. It just has to be the LLC that you start your passive income journey, right? It's got one employee, it's you. And over time, here's the reason why I'm saying this is your way to money, is it allows you to influence the outcome. Number one, if you start a business, you now have the ability to influence the outcome. Where you're at now, if you're in a W-2 role, you have very little to no ability to influence the outcome of that company. But if you have your own business, you have that. The second thing you get is you get to maximize the tax code. So books like Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright or anything by Tom Wheelwright will show you that the tax code is designed for people that own businesses, not for people who are in that E quadrant. And so look for ways that you can do exactly what Russ mentioned, one of our Passive Income Mastermind members, making more money and paying no taxes. That is the way to wealth. That's the way to making money, because it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And then the third is, once you've got that business, it now puts you in a position to be able to take that business and make it passive, as I've already mentioned. But man, that is the path to making money. Create your own business and then eventually hire great operators to take it over.
Man, I was going to mention both of those books, Stallion, and you beat me to it, right? Like I definitely was going to give a plug to go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/new book. You should totally go there, because in that we challenge the fact that the conventional wisdom that says that you should accumulate wealth is a poor path to become financially free. For many people, they will never achieve true financial independence by trying to save money and invest money in the typical qualified plans. But yet, with the concept of passive income exceeding your monthly expenses, not only do you have a framework, you have a formula, you can know exactly where you are in relationship to it. right? All you have to do is know what your passive income is and divide that into the number of expenses that you have for that month. And you know, as a percentage, how close you are to financial freedom. I also was going to say that you should look at Tom Wheelwright's book, because he talks about all the different ways in which you can avoid paying taxes the legal way, because the government literally is telling you exactly what they want you to do. They're saying, we don't want to be in the business of housing people. So if you will own real estate and provide rental property for people, we will give you huge tax deductions. We'll allow you to write this whole building off against the income that you're bringing in. Or they'll say, hey, we want you guys that are way smarter than us to go do all the research and development on these different projects. If you want to get in this green energy, right? Like, I know they're all with the green energy kick. So you find out what the government is wanting you to do, and you go out and invest and create income streams off of those things, and they'll give you amazing tax breaks from it. I was going to say all of those things. Thank you so much for stealing my thunder there, Stallion. That was really good. Appreciate it. I don't know if I gave anybody a point that they didn't hear out of that, but that's a good one. So anyway, I think Alex Hormozi and his book, I believe it was $100 million offers, said this too. So I'll give you one more. Well, I got two more coming up. One more is from Alex Hormozi, where he said, man, if so many people are trying to figure out ways to build wealth, and they'll start a business and they'll try to grow up a business from $1 million to $2 million. He said, how about going out and buying businesses that are worth $1 million? Go buy 10 of them, roll them up. You buy them at 3 or 4x times what they're making, and then you roll them up into something for 10x, right? And he gives a formula for that. And the last one I'll give is something you and I are doing personally, Joey. One of the money-making principles that I found that I love is the one that we share every single month on our passive income report. It comes from a book called Dirt Rich. It's actually finding inefficient markets. And in the book Dirt Rich, it talks about how you can buy raw land, little tracts of raw land from people who own it, who are paying taxes on it, who have no homes on it, no buildings of any sort, and you can pay them as little as 25 cents on the dollar of what they're worth, because there's no real estate agent out there that really is going to, be willing to market your piece of property that may only be worth $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, right? And then you can turn around and sell that property on terms, owner finance terms, to somebody through an ad on Facebook, because the banks, they're not willing to lend you money on a property that may only cost $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. And so in that inefficient market, you can earn upwards of 72% on your money. And we actually been doing this now for 4 years. We are up to $30,000 a month in passive income, grows off this exact one strategy. So if you're looking for a money-making model, that may be a great book for you to go read and apply it to your situation. Gentlemen, what a great job of breaking down different books. I hope as a listener, you got maybe 1 or 2 books out of this, or strategy or framework that you hadn't considered. If you want the full list of the 40 books that we used and referenced throughout this time, go to the show notes. Also, all the links that we talked about will be in there as well. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.